And we conclude our air quote 90th anniversary NCAA team here on episode 157 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. I'm Jason Bryant along with Matt Dernlan. And Matt, we are looking at a weight class grouping today that is unlike any other in any of these projects, whether it be the 75th anniversary team, whether it be the 90th anniversary team, whether it be just you and me at a bar talking about wrestling. These four weights, the upper weights of this quadrant or grouping up to 2020 is absolutely loaded, and it's going to lead to a lot of coin tosses today, I feel.
Well, it's almost like when we started the 90th 3 episodes ago, it was relatively easy. That first one was easy, and it just ramped up. Last episode was more difficult. This one, hands down. I mean, I think we're to the point where we almost have to apologize to start the episode because we're going to almost eliminate half the list right from the get-go, because if we don't, it's going to be an impossibility to make it through the rest of the list.
Yeah, the all-time greats that are left off this list is almost, again, I use this word, wrestling blasphemy, wrestling heresy. It's what it is. So if you're just joining us, if this is the first time you've checked into the show or you're watching on our YouTube channel and coming off of therudis.com, we revisited the 75th anniversary team, which was a fan vote that was released in 2005. Then we added 15 more years to it and said, okay, well, that's 15 years. We'll add one more spot. So we have 6 wrestlers per weight class grouping. The first one was 125 to 141. Then we went the middleweights, 149 to 165. Now the upper weights, 174 to 285 in our modern era. So again, we've added to the additional 5. The original 75th team was Cale Sanderson, Dan Hodge, Ed Bannock, Carlton Hasselrig, and Kurt Angle. Our 75th team that we provided our revisionist history for, we swapped out. We got Kurt Angle dropped off the list. Mark Schultz, at least, was my selection. Matt, I'm not sure if you deferred from that or not, because he was weird because he has a DNP and a 111. He's the only one like this, but where he was over the top, for at least for me, was beating 3 4-time All-Americans and some all-time greats in the final. So that's what put him on the list there. So what do you remember about that 75th discussion that you think is going to make this even harder to determine?
Well, I think I was actually going to go in a different vein. I was going to say what makes this difficult, what makes this discussion difficult. There's an argument that in the last 15 years, we could develop an all-time great team just in the last 15, that there's arguments, justifiable conversation to be had to say the whole 70th team could be eliminated.
Save Cale.
Save Cale.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, again,
we're going to be adding 5 more. Right. 5 of the 6 could be replaced here.
And as we've done with the other individuals that are 4-timer, they are automatically on the list, especially the greatest of all time. 4 titles, undefeated, the only one to ever do it. Of course, Cale's number 1 on the list, first and forever, most likely.
Yeah, and it's weird. I would have loved to have actually had the junior college wrestlers be eligible to be counted for wins. By then, Cale would have more than 159 if the rules for today were applied, because those victories do count on your overall record. Now, they do not count for qualification criteria and stuff like that, but there were like 7 or 8 junior college wrestlers that Cale beat in the early going at some of these opens that were like, they were not counted on his record, because in that era, up through 2002, matches against junior college wrestlers did not count. Side note, matches from junior college wrestlers still do not count if you're an NAIA wrestler, which is kind of interesting. Granted, if you're an NAIA wrestler, your matches count for the junior college kids, go figure. So it's just weird how it works. That's another tangent entirely of too much stupid knowledge that I possess. So let's just go back to the people that we have to eliminate from this list. And that is any 2-timer, because we're in an era of 4-year eligibility. And if you don't win at least 3 titles, you probably can't really even be considered, no matter how many times you made the finals. So our apologies on a scroll are, this is a production trick, maybe we can get Mackenzie to put these on a scroll. Ben Askren, Missouri, 2-2-1-1. Steve Mako, Iowa, Oklahoma State, 2-1-1-2. Jake Varner, Olympic champion, Iowa State, 2-2-1-1. Other honorable mentions that go in here: Jake Herbert, 3-2-1-1. Quentin Wright, 6-1-2-1. Mark Perry, 2-3-1-1. Cole Conrad, 4-2-1-1. Tony Nelson, 5-1-1-2. Nick Wisdowski, 8-1-1-2. Gabe Dean, 3-1-1-2. two-time champs that were three-time All-Americans. Chris Perry, blood round 3-1-1. Zahid Valencia 3-1-1. Of course, we know what happened to him this year. Other ones, Chris Pendleton, who we had on the show recently, did not place as a true freshman, goes 3-1-1. We got Mark Hall of this year's asterisk class at 1-2-2 ? So let's think about all the that is like just the creme de la creme of college wrestling in the last 15 years. And they're not good enough to be in this discussion today.
And honestly, no disrespect to all these
they're
great
good
wrestlers.
enough. Their credentials just don't. I got to clarify that.
But we don't even have time to even discuss them. Like there's so many other things to discuss that in this golden era in the last 15. These are all-time greats. These are programmable greats.
I do want to throw some stats out there. At least give them that credit, because Askren 153-8, lost to Pendleton as a freshman and sophomore finals, then beats Jake Herbert, and then beats Keith Gavin, who was an eventual national champion. So loses to a two-timer twice, beats a two-timer, beats another champ. Steve Mocco, of course, his rivalry with Tommy Rollins is pretty much goes back to when they were kids and things of that nature, all the way up through the Olympic trials. Beats Kevin Hoy from Air Force, who was the beneficiary of Tommy's injury, made the finals on that side. Then Mocco splits with Cole Conrad after transferring to Oklahoma State. 6 career losses there. Jake Varner, 121-10, went 2-2-1-1, beat Craig Brester both times in the finals. Brester was a 3-time All-American, loses to Jake Herbert as a freshman, loses to Mike Pasillo, who was a national champion. So 6-1-2, and then Pasillo's career slowed by injuries there with the blood round finish as a senior. And just, and looking at Pendleton, we mentioned him and Burroughs, they did not redshirt. So, and Pendleton was thrown in in 79-10, record kind of deceiving, losing to, some All-Americans as a freshman year, losing to Brad Dillon in the quarterfinals in 2003, and then Dillon losing to Robbie Waller, which then created the Robbie Waller rule with the drop down on the ankle being a stalemate, then a stall. And then, of course, Mark Hall with the battles with Zahid in recent memory. So those are just some surface stats of how good the guys that we're not even going to talk about are.
Which I'm glad we did, because they at least deserve that. They are all-time greats. They just, unfortunately, they can't make the list, but they should obviously be in this conversation. And it'll be interesting as things evolve and we get more context in the years to come, if we gather any more insight or how we more accurately place these guys on the list. Because it's kind of like it's a no-win situation in a lot of ways. But I think if we're only figuring this now, shame on us for the last month and a half from shooting these. Like, this was difficult and we knew it was going to be difficult, but so now the rest of the guys.
Well, it's really eye-opening to consider these stats. Let's think about this. Since 2005, we've had 6 3-time champions at just these weight classes alone. 5 of them were 4-timers. We've had 13 2-time champions, 13 multiple-time, 2-time champions, 5 4-time finalists just since 2005 at these 4 weight classes. That's freaking bananas.
Yeah.
BANANAS, bananas. I think I spelled that right.
Yeah.
So now, in addition to what we had with Sanderson, Hodge, Bannock, Hasselrig, at least, and then Schultz and Engel being discussed, I replaced Engel with Schultz. I really, and thing is also people who we're going to go back and not consider that missed out last time. Well, Dick Hutton, Earl McCready, Jimmy Jackson, Kurt Angle, which we bumped Stephen Neal, Chris Campbell, Jess Lewis. I mean, we can go back. You can go back to the Upperweight 75th episode to see who we again from the old time era. I don't want to say that like they're old, but there are 4-year wrestlers in that era. But just the number of names. Now, let's stop beating around the bush. The 3-timers and 4-time finalists that we have in the pool are Bo Nickel and Kyle Snyder. 3-timers that were 4-time All-Americans. So Jaden Cox of Missouri, Ed Ruth of Penn State, and Jake Rochult of Oklahoma State. We also have a 3-timer and a 3-time All-American. The only 3 times he placed were Greg Jones, of course, with his infamous 1 D&P 1-1. So that's who we're talking about. So on the surface level, let's just start. Bo Nickel, 1 Penn State, 2 1-1-1. 120-3. Kyle Snyder, abbreviated schedule, 2-1-1-1, 75-5. Jaden Cox went 1-5-1-1, 133-5. Ed Ruth, 3-1-1-1, 136-3. Jake Rochold, 1-3-1-1, 105-20. And then Greg Jones, 126-4. So right off the bat, two of those are not like the other, and they are Jake Rochold and Greg Jones. I guess let's start by process of elimination. Rochold, even though he goes 1-3-1-1, has that extra placement above Jaden Cox. 20 career losses, had 9 losses, 4 losses, 3 losses, 4 losses in his 4 years. I think the 20 losses might just have to knock him off completely right off the bat.
I think so. I mean, if we're going to create hard criteria, yeah. I mean, when all else is equal, where do you look for the differences? And yes, 20 losses in comparison. This is, I mean, really, it's not really close in comparison to the other guys as far as
he has 15 more losses than the next guy in our group.
Yeah. So that 15. In and of itself.
But he's also a lights on guy. He clearly showed that, hey, March is what mattered. I mean, he didn't even win a Big 12 title as a freshman. Scott Barker, who was then at Missouri, beat him, and then he beat Scott Barker in a national final. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was a 10 seed, I think, as he won it. He was either a 7 or a 10. I know he was coming from the low side of the bracket there in Kansas City. So,
and these are one of those guys. Like, he's a bright lights guy. It didn't really matter what was going on in the regular season. And for some of these guys, it's hard for people to understand sometimes that once you get a taste of winning at the highest level, you kind of put the regular season in context. Yes, it's important. You want to win every time, but you know, especially those guys that have early level success, just like Jake did winning as a freshman, typically they're like, yeah, the regular season is all about preparation. It's just getting me prepared, and I know what I'm going to do. Like, I may take some punches during the regular season, but give me the bright lights and the big stage, and I'm going to bring it every time. And another guy that made the honorable mention on this list that was another personality like this was Quentin Wright. I mean, he is a guy that, you know, he was one of, I hate to say this, but the practice room wasn't even his foray. Like, he got beat by a lot of guys in the practice room. Why? Because he was always trying to get better. He wasn't just trying to win the go in the wrestling room. He was trying to get better. So all those crazy things that you used to see Quentin hit on the big stage at the NCAA tournament, he was trying those things out in practice, getting ready for the big lights to come on. And there's similarities between a Rochold and a Quentin Wright, where I think that the bigger the stage. And I always used to say about Quentin, like, you put him in front of 5 people against a decent guy, flip a coin, he could get beat. But you put him on a big stage against King Kong with 50,000 people, there was no way Quentin Wright was going to get beat by King Kong, because he just loved it. He embraced it. And that's a similar feeling that I had about Jake Rochold when I watched him get to March. I'm like, nobody's stopping this guy. Like, he's got a different gear. And there's something to be said about those guys that they know how to switch and flip that gear when it really, really matters. And so I don't think it would be interesting to talk to Rochold at some point. Like, how much of those 20 losses really affected you? Right. And I would tend to say, like, honestly, not many, because did they really matter? You know, in my mind, only March mattered.
Yeah, and talk about the family too. I mean, he had 3 brothers. The 2 other brothers were high quality wrestlers, and the sister, she was. I think there was a story about her like kicking somebody in the face in a women's soccer game or something. That's a tough family right there. Yeah. You can't help but be tough there.
But for sake of elimination, for the sake of this conversation, I think 20 losses eliminate you, especially when you look at everybody else on the list. We're talking 5 or less losses for the most part, right? That's crazy.
Yeah. And then now the next one we have to go to is Greg Jones, 126-4. 2 of those losses came as a sophomore in Kansas City. Lost to Ralph Everett in the tiebreakers, and then Rashad Evans. He didn't give up a takedown in either bout and lost both matches, and DNPs the year after after winning it in Albany, where he beat Greg Parker from Princeton, who was a DNQ, DNP 2 and an 8, 2-time All-American. Other victories, he beat Ben Heiser from Northern Illinois in the finals, who was a two-time All-American, goes DNQ, DNP 6-2, and then Tyler Baer of Cornell, who was DNQ, DNP, DNP 2. So when we look at the lore of Greg Jones, dynamic, lightning quick, almost untouchable, he really didn't have the deepest field. Granted, 74 as a freshman, we thought it was kind of a coin toss. Remember, Otto Olson was the top seed that year. My roommate, Jeff Rusak, was the 5. Parker was the 4. You had, people in there. It's like, oh, it's kind of a wide open weight. But you look at the star power, he doesn't really have it, as is, he has a two-timer, and a one-time All-American in the finals. And then we compare that to Rocholt, for example, kind of similar, a two-timer with Barker, loses to Ben Heiser in the semis, the year Heiser meets Jones in their finals there. It beats Sean Stender, who's a 3-time All-American. Then finally, Rocholt beats Phil Davis, who goes 7-2-5-1. So Jones, the bad tournament, half of his losses came that day. Or that, I think he made it to the second day. But it was half the losses came in that tournament. Kind of like talking about Tim Krieger. He had 2 of his 3 losses were in one tournament. So, and the thing is, with a field this tight, that's probably got to eliminate him, even though, we were touching on him not being considered on the 75th team. Well, 2005 was when he was wrestling in the finals that year, winning his 3rd title. 3-time champs are, there's 40, I think I last looked, there were 47, 48 of them. And it's weird. You've got 4 losses in your career. You've got 3 titles, but there's no 4 placements there. And that's for purposes of this discussion. I think we have to move beyond Greg Jones.
Yeah, I think we do. And again, you can't control who you wrestle. I mean, that's out of your control. He beat the guys that were out in front of him, but points of differentiating, the points of differential here are, yes, he wasn't a 4-timer. So process of elimination, you have to eliminate him. And
now the question is comparing him, say if Greg Jones is in our 75th team discussion, and it's him, he's up there against a Mark Schultz, they both have 3 titles. They both have 3 All-American finishes, and both have a 1 year where they did not place. And then Schultz has 15 losses. So like if we're comparing Mark Schultz and Greg Jones for the 75th team, I think we may even have to lean Jones, even though Schultz's victories, at least in my estimation, were far superior in terms of everything about those 3 guys he beat were all world. Whereas, I think the only reason I remember Greg Parker is because he was in the same quarter bracket as my roommate. No offense, but that's the one thing that I remember about Greg Jones's opponents is it should have been Rusak.
Yeah, and I think if you were to compare Greg versus Mark Schultz, the case would be made for Greg, and I think he would get the nod if it was a 75th anniversary discussion. But I think, like it or not, I think the 75th anniversary team had a bias towards your entire career. And what we've tried to do is really narrow it down to those 4 years that you have to compete at the national tournament. So I think there's definitely an influence on Mark Schultz freestyle career that factored into him getting placed, because just on the surface, when you look at, if you change Mark Schultz's name, let's talk about this. If you change his name to whatever, Mark Johnson, and he was 1-1-1, but had a 97-15 record, I think the perspective changes.
I don't know, because remember at the end of that episode, we're sitting there arguing, and I'm looking at Schultz beating Deanna 3-6-2-2, beating Bannock 1-1-2-1, beating Goldman 2-2-2-1. He beat 2 4-time finalists.
So I guess that would be really interesting, because again, how I just said on one side, you can't control who you face, but who you beat and the quality of your opponent does matter. And Mark did that in such a dominant way, especially his signature win against Bannock. I mean, that was a defining moment for him and a defining moment in the world of wrestling at the time.
All right. Now here's what we've got. Moving on. We've got the last, this is probably the toughest 4. Yeah. And I think we have to, we either pick 2 or we're bumping Ed Bannock off the list, or we're bumping, how do you dare bump Dan? Well, Dan Hodge was undefeated and there's a trophy named after him. I almost think, we make the argument that we bumped Bill Cole off of our last middleweight list, kind of for the same reason. But there's a man who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated right behind me on the wall. He can crush apples at almost 90 years old. He might still get the pass for the older generation, but right now, I think the spots by Bannock, Hasselrigger, and Schultz are up for the taking when you consider the careers of Bo Nickel, Kyle Snyder, Jaden Cox, and Ed Ruth, because we had 4 3-timers here, and Snyder beating Cox in this that year, and then Kyvan Gadsden, who's not even getting a nod here, and he beat 2 of these guys. So he has a win over Jaden Cox. So let's just start at, let's see, who's got the least amount of losses. Best winning percentage, it looks like it's best winning percentage, 136-3, Ed Ruth. Ed Ruth's career losses are to Jimmy Sheptock, Nick Amuchastegui, and Gabe Dean. That is it. And Amuchastegui, who he would later beat in the finals, he went and Amuchastegui beat him in the tournament, and Ed's knee locked up, causing the whole everybody that hated Penn State to melt down, saying he quit, blah, 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 defaulted because he was losing. Amuchastegui was wrestling a great match against him there as a freshman. Amuchastegui went DNP 4-2-2. And then we look at the junior year, Robert Hamlin of Lehigh, he went 2-4-2. And then Jimmy Sheptock, who he beat in the finals, was DNQ, round of 12, 6-2. So didn't beat any national champions throughout the course of his finals. Avenged a loss to Gabe Dean, who beat him at the Southern Scuffle. But you have 3 losses. 3, and you avenged all of them. All of them.
Yes.
It's like,
and this is where I have to remove myself a little bit, JB, because this is, I recruit, like Ed was one of my guys at Penn State. There's a bias there that's established just from me coaching him, me recruiting him, that for me, I think he's the greatest wrestler in Penn State history. And therefore I think he's definitely on this list. Because if you, not only the winning percentage, but the bonus points that he got, he was like ultimately dominant. And I will put the little story to rest about him quitting in the semifinals, because I was there. So I guess let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 2 things I want to ask about Ed. One, you've already taken my thunder on that one. So explain the Amuchastegui match.
Okay. So his coming into the tournament, we knew that he had a cartilage, a meniscus issue. Like it was going in and out. It had locked up a number of times in practice, but we didn't have, at the time when the injury occurred, we didn't have enough time on the clock to clean this up. Like if it was in January, we could have said, okay, we're going to clean this up and he'll be good to go.
When you say clean it up, you mean get it scoped or something like that?
Yeah, get a scope. Typically the return on that is anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Now there's another discussion if you repair the meniscus. And then if you repair the meniscus, that's more of a 3 to 6 month procedure, if not even longer. So there was a dialogue going on. There was a dialogue being had during the season about what we should do. And we were like, hey, Ed was like, let's table it till after the season. And then we can make an informed decision. Where we are at the time of the season, like it's not feasible to clean it up or repair it. So let's not even talk about it. It is what it is. We have to wrestle. And so we were prepared, and we had conversation with him. We're like, Ed, there's a possibility that your knee may lock up. He said, well, we'll just deal with it when it happens, because there's no rhyme or reason when your knee locks up. It just happens at the weirdest times and the weirdest situations. And so you can't even avoid certain areas, because.
So, and then what does, I mean, when we say knee locks up, it's like, oh yeah, your back gives out, your knee locks up. What does the knee actually, is locking? Is that what it does? You can't undo.
So literally,
explain what that means.
If you look at the joint, there's the joint, and there's usually little gaps in there. And typically where that meniscus, what happens with that meniscus, it'll come unloose and it'll lock into one of those sliding areas in the joint. And so typically what happens is when your knee's bent or gets twisted and it gets locked in this position instead of this position, so you can't get full extension on your leg, and you can't straighten it, and you can't completely bend it. It's literally locked at a certain angle. And I think Ed's in the match was more around 75%. Like it was at a steep position. Like he couldn't straighten it out, and he just couldn't get it unlocked, and it locked up in the match. And yes, he was getting beat. And part of the reason he was getting beat is because his knee was locked up. We had to make the decision because we were in the middle of a team race too. Like we were in the legitimate hunt to win the title, and we're like, we need Ed on the backside. Like we need him to come back, and
this is not. You can't take a med 4 to 6 on this one here.
Yeah, and we couldn't get his injury time ran out. The knee couldn't come unlocked, and so the end of the match was the end of the match.
Yeah. So, and from my ignorance here, because I've never had an injury like this. I didn't wrestle long enough to have those types of injuries, to be quite honest with you. But so, from the medical staff situation, what do you do to unlock the knee? Is it just something that you just have to wait for it to the muscles around the leg the knee to relax? So it says, okay, good.
Yeah.
Like, oh, thank goodness. Is it like that?
It's exactly like that, and you don't know. Like you can't in the moment.
You can't force it. It just has to happen.
You're tight, you're tense, you're emotional, you're stressed, and all those things contribute to your body locking up. Your body starts going to self-protection mode, where it's like something's wrong here with this knee, and the body and the mind is saying, protect this area. And so you almost have to relax and unwind, and then typically it just slides right out, and you're like, oh, I'm fine. And that's the other side of the story. Back in the tunnel and a few minutes after the match, that's what happened to Ed. His knee, he relaxed, it came unlocked, and he looked at me. And I remember, because we're all in the moment, the team title was in the crosshairs. We knew it was there for the taking. And so you're trying to pick people back up after they lost. And it was obviously emotional for Ed. I'm like, Ed, and I was trying to pump him up, and I'll never forget Ed, because he's the coolest dude in the world. He said, Coach, don't worry. I got this. I was like, I'll get third. Don't worry. And if you look back, he dominated his way back to third. And I
remember when he beat Mac Lunas earlier in the year, and I'm like, what? And then he did it again. I mean, Mac was so good. And then Ed just played with him. I mean, it was just like, it was one of those things like, did this, because I held Mac in super high regard, because I had him ranked number 1 when I was doing the rankings for Intermat. He had that trilogy with Dave Rella as a senior that was back and forth. And, I always felt like, Mac he had that horrible year. He was one of the 1 seeds that just, he's got that going for him. That was the kid you wanted to see win it. And then I remember watching Ed Ruth wrestle. Where was I at? I was at the PIAA States. He was wrestling. So he might have been wrestling Christian Morey from like Redlands East, Central Dauphin East, I think, back in the day at the PIAA. Right after he lost to Quentin Wright, I just remember, like, who's this kid? The Morey kid ended up wrestling at West Virginia later, because my roommate Chad was coaching up at CD East at the time. So it was like, that's where I saw Ed. And then I see Ed later on wrestle Quentin Wright to like an 8-7 match later that year at what was the old Scholastic Duels. This time they were at Delaware State. So I'd always remember seeing Ed, but I was like, this guy's too good to finish 5th in the state. And then he comes to PA, he goes to Penn State, and just like, oh yeah, guess what? I'm going to win 3 national titles. I'm only going to lose 3 matches ever. I saw him lose 3 matches with my own eyes in the span of like 3 months. Then we didn't see that happen for 4 years. So it's quite amazing for a kid from just a kid from Harrisburg.
I mean, he flipped the switch and went to another gear. He's a guy that, yeah, he just needed that next level and that developmental opportunity at the next level. And I think the common assumption when you talk to Ed and you watch him, even when he's competing, he's so laid back and so calm. His interviews, you don't even know, half the people like, does this guy even want to win? But I tell you what, he was one of the hardest workers I've ever been around. But he played the game. He was one of the hardest workers that didn't want you to know that he was working. There was many times at night when I was leaving rec hall and I'd be walking past the wrestling room and the lights were off, and I would hear, but I could hear something going on in the room. Like sometimes you could hear the familiar sound of the jump rope clicking on the mat, or guys shooting. I'm like, what is going on in here? And I can't tell you the number of countless times I walked past the room when the lights were off and I heard something go on, and this is like 7, 8 o'clock, and I'd peek my head in the room, and there was Ed working out in the shadows when no one was around, when no one could see. He was always working. So this guy had a burning desire to win and a burning work ethic to match his desire that I've rarely seen from guys. And then you introduce a talent to that level of work ethic, and this is why you get one of the most special careers in NCAA history.
Yeah, and then we compare that. And actually, the second thing I wanted to talk about is one thing is like Ed was there. He was going to Penn State regardless of who the coach was at the time. I mean, this was right in the era of the Sunderland to Sanderson situation, which you rode the wave on both sides of that. And Ed that's a nice little present to show up. It's like, oh yeah, hi, I'm Ed. I'm gonna win 3 titles for you.
Yeah. I think, I mean, Cale's doing what he's doing, but he walked into a pretty decent situation when he took over at Penn State, but obviously the rest is history. He put his stamp. There's a lot of guys that can't coach talent, can't max out the talent that they get. And that's the one thing that's the beauty of what Cale and his other coaches had been able to do is like they maximize and pull out every ounce of talent that these kids have. And you can't say that would have been the case for Ed with another coaching staff.
Yeah, and I don't want to throw Troy under the bus because he was always great to me. But does Ed Ruth win 3 national titles if Cale Sanderson's not his coach?
Yeah, who knows? We'll never know. I mean, it's one of those things like this year. Would all these guys have truly won? Would Iowa really have won the team title? We'll never know. We can speculate. I like to think and believe that Ed was so special. He just needed the opportunity. But yeah, you never know. And that's now, but we do know the other side of the story. We knew what he did once he got that talent. And then once he produced with that talent, the train was rolling. And
there's that F word, fun. Now, next is of the last 4 here, the other 3-time champion that was not a 4-time finalist, J'den Cox, who again now has won a couple of world titles. He's got an Olympic medal. Again, like Jordan Burroughs, in terms of their career being added to based on their immediate success, and in J'den's case, while still in college, where he's got I got a world bronze, I got Olympic bronze, I got a couple world titles. 133-5 with 1-5-1-1. Freshman year beats Nick Heflin, and let's be honest, one of the more grass-growing type of finals matches that we've seen. Heflin was blood round 5-5-2. Sophomore year lost to Snyder and McIntosh, loses to Snyder in the semis, then hits McIntosh in the Conci semis. Morgan McIntosh ended up finishing D&P 7-3-2 in his career. Junior year beats McIntosh in the finals. Senior year beats Brett Favre of Minnesota in the finals, who was D&Q, D&P, including a loss to Scott Patrick of Davidson, and then 3-2. So looking at and one thing about J'den's career losses, he has 5 career losses. Kyvan Gadsden, Morgan McIntosh, Kyle Snyder, and who else? The only guy to beat him twice in college.
This is unbelievable. I'm not going to steal your thunder on this one.
Phil Wellington from Ohio University. One was a legit loss. The other was a DQ. So this is one thing that I think it might be one of those, keep this in the back of your head. This could be, I hate to say this, a disqualifying factor, because it is I believe the worst loss of these 4 that we're going to discuss, because Wellington was never an All-American. Again, lost to him legit and then lost him by DQ. Then, Gadsden national champ, McIntosh national finals, Kyle Snyder, we know how good he is. So what's amazing about J'den Cox is doing it as a true freshman, comes out there, just doesn't miss a beat. I mean, maybe he was this good the whole time, but it just looked like he got better every year, where I'm sure he did get better every year, but it's like it was just every now and then he had something that was like, okay, then there was that. I mean, how do you jump levels when you're already a national champ? So I guess the Wellington losses or the DQ, you can make a case for that it was, he did throw him through a table a la Dr. Tom Pritchard here, but he didn't. It was one of those things like, it's like an injury default to DQ. You kind of maybe put them in the same vein, but there's the legit loss to Wellington earlier in his career. So
that's what makes it interesting, right? That the guy that he lost by DQ is also the guy that beat him. And it's like, how do you separate those? Because it's
matchups. Sometimes it's like we were talking about the guy that who beat Tim Krieger twice. It's like was NC State's name's escaping me right now, but like, so with that, looking at his credentials of the guys he beat in the finals, 3-timer, 2-timer, not chop liver. I think the weight class with Brett Favre, Colin Moore, Jared Hott, Jaden Cox there. I mean, that was just they were all good, but I think there was a clear separation. I mean, I think it's being head and shoulders. Granted, again, he did get taken down by Colin Moore a couple times when he's a freshman, blah, blah, blah. But it's any other, I mean, I don't he comes around in an era where we're comparing him to Nickel, Snyder, and Ruth. And the 5 is going to be this qualifying factor. He had, again, 2 of his 5 losses were in the same tournament. Yeah. It's amazing how great this era of wrestling was.
It's insane. And this is what's so hard to separate this conversation, because we see what Jaden's still doing.
Mm-hmm. And we see how great of a human being he is. That's another thing that, like, you get to know these people. Snyder, salt of the earth guy. I don't really know Bo that well. I didn't really have that. I don't say I had a great relationship. I don't really know Ed Ruth that well. I've had him on the show a couple times, but again, I know Snyder and Cox better than I do probably the rest of this list, because I've covered them. I've interviewed them. I've announced their matches. I mean, I've conversed with them a little bit more than the rest. And it's just, there's now the human element that is added to not just your fanhood. If you're a Buckeye fan, or if you're a Nittany Lion fan, or if you're a Mizzou fan, that's what makes this type of discussion so tough. Is now we've got, is Jaden Cox? Can we argue? I mean, and can we replace him on the list? Well, can we put him ahead of Bannock? Because that's where it'd have to go. And 1-1-2-1, and just the base numbers better than 1-5-1-1. But Ed has 9 losses. Jaden has 5. Oh, my heart hurts on this one, Matt.
Yeah, because when you think about, and I think this is where everybody's
too good not to be on this team.
Because both he and Snyder, he and Kyle are as good of individuals as they are wrestlers. And we can rarely say that about human beings in sports. We can rarely say that. But with these 2 guys, they actually may be better people than they are wrestlers, which is that's a really scary thing to say. They're that good of individuals, and they keep getting better. You were talking about how Cox kept jumping in college, but he's kept jumping after college. That's what's so crazy. Like, big gains, like, you can see it. It's obvious to the eye that this guy is getting better every year. But again, we've got to separate this. And that's what's going to be tough with Kyle, because he was multitasking throughout his college career, as he was moonlighting as a senior level wrestler, or he was moonlighting as a college wrestler who wanted to be a senior level athlete. That's more accurate. But I think with Jaden, yes, I mean, there's such a slim separation from all these guys. It's got to be the 5th and the Wellington is the lines of demarcation where I would not probably put Jaden on the list.
Well, we also have to figure out we're looking, because we're adding 6 and we have probably 7. You basically have to eliminate one. And then perhaps, is it Hasselrig, who is, remember, got a DNQ and a 3rd place finish in Division II, but his 6 titles, but he's only got 3 losses. So we're comparing not winning Division II in the 80s to a 5th place finish at D1. So I think the bigger argument when we get to it, maybe Hasselrig versus Cox. Table that. So we will come back to that, because that may be, but again, Carlton Hasselrig had the opportunity to win 6, to win 7. He won 6. So, and again, that loss that Hasselrig had was to a guy who finished 6th in D1 from Edinburgh, Dean Hall, who he beat the next year in the national finals in Division I. So again, we're getting almost to get the coin out again, Matt. Now, these next 2, I think, are pretty much, I think you're a shoe-in. You can almost probably make the case that Snyder didn't have a full schedule, but he did go 2-1-1-1, lost to Kyvan Gadsden. Okay, his 5 losses. He's got 2 to Gadsden. He's lost to Micah Burak. He lost to Morgan McIntosh, and he lost to Adam Kuhn. So no chop liver amongst those losses. All of those losses were all Americans. So we factor that in. He had probably the most talked about upperweight final in 30 years when he beat Nick Gwizdowski, and then did it again 2 years later when he beat Adam Kuhn. So which one of those matches were talked about more? Or then you've got the fact that Kuhn, 2nd in the world in Greco, and then Snyder, a world champion and 2nd in the world, also meeting in the NCAA finals, having split during the year. That was just the media coverage, the high drama with the Kuhn Snyder final was just amazing. So again, the golden era of upper weights, but also the golden era of coverage. When we look at what ESPN did to promote that, they had that dual meet during the year on ESPN2, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So Kyle Snyder, I think even with only 80 matches in this era compared to Jaden, who had 138, he beat Jaden head to head when they were in the same weight. So that puts him a little bit. I mean, that's a rare opportunity that we have a head to head to compare
And
in the same category.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple points that we have to clarify here, because even though Kyle didn't have the matches, like it or not, he was wrestling a full schedule. It's just half of those matches were freestyle matches against the world's best. So not only was he beating the best in the country on the collegiate level, he was beating the best in the world while he was wrestling, literally while he was wrestling the college season.
Still a teenager at that.
Still a teenager, winning world and Olympic titles as he's winning NCAA titles. We've never really seen anybody do that, really. And the hijinks of his matches, like he beat, in my mind, one of the greatest finals match ever against two of the all-time greats in Gwizdowski, and it was already labeled the all-time best. And then a year or two later, he and Kuhn
it lived up to the hype. It went to overtime. I mean, it was a come from behind win. I mean, it was Madison Square Garden. I mean, are you kidding me? I don't think you could have added any more drama to that situation.
Then we have a literal match two years later that's live that resembled Rocky Balboa versus Thunderlips, right? Against Adam Kuhn. That's kind of what it looked like. Kuhn was so huge compared to Kyle, but it was a real match, not the exhibition.
I want to give Adam Kuhn credit. He was probably a better actor at that stage in his life than Hulk Hogan was in Rocky III. Let's be quite honest. Where is the Rudis Thunderlip shirt? That's what I want to know. You guys got Rocky gear. Where's the Thunderlip shirt? I'll rock the heck out of one of those.
I have to bring that up to our design team.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That up. You will sell Thunderlips. I will get my buddies from Conrad's Pro Wrestling Podcast, and they see a Thunderlip shirt, they'll be all over that.
So on the back we say "in the flesh, baby," right?
In the flesh. Yeah. Anyway, this is supposed to be an exhibition. Okay, so we've got Snyder again. Look at his losses. Lost as a freshman in the finals to Kyvan Gadsden, who did get his ice cream. And then that year he had beaten Jaden Cox in the semis when Jaden had won the year before. So we've got the two losses. The Burak match is probably his worst loss.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like Nathan Burak, I always said he was the nicest Hawkeye. I remember him growing up in Colorado Springs. It's like, you're just too nice to go to a place that people admonish for face smushing. So I just thought that Nathan was not Nathan was and the whole Burak family is just first class people. Coronado High School in Colorado Springs. Really got to know a couple of them while I was out there. Of course, Micah with the mullet when he wrestled at UPenn. But so we got Snyder with 2-1-1-1. I think he's a fairly safe bet. Again, like John W., though, winning world titles while he's still in college, not factoring in, but definitely playing in the psyche of our discussion. And then Bo Nickel going 2-1-1-1, 120 wins, 3 losses. His 3 career losses, twice to Miles Martin, once to Nate Jackson. So what do we got? I mean, they're not bad losses. Losing to Martin as a freshman, who Martin is the only 11 seed to win the national title, then beating Gabe Dean. The year I thought Gabe Dean was the smasher of all smashing people. I didn't think there was any way Bo Nickel would beat Gabe Dean this year. Tight match, then beats Miles Martin again, beats Colin Moore. So 3 of his 4 championships are wrestling Buckeyes. So, that Penn State, Ohio State battle is in the flesh there. And then, of course, I thought I think probably the most impressive win. Yeah, he pinned Miles Martin. They win the title because of that. I still think beating Gabe Dean was probably the most impressive of I think any of his victories. Pinning people is one thing, but I mean, Gabe Dean was head and shoulders, in my opinion, above the field that year, including Bo Nickel. And he clearly was not, because Bo beat him. And that was just what a career. Just what a career.
There's an argument to be made at the time when Bo beat Gabe that Gabe was arguably the best pound for pound wrestler in college. I think
He
that's
majored Miles Martin earlier in the year, and that was returning. I mean, the All-Star Classic, it was, I think it was at Cleveland State. And it was, he just might have been somewhere else. I can't remember off the top of my head. Might have been there. But it was, I mean, you just majored a returning national champion.
and with his previous wins, one of the 3 guys to beat Ed Ruth. I mean, he just had a historic career, and there was nobody. I think everybody recognized the greatness of Bo Nickel, but they're like, it's one of those things. It's not your time. Wait till next year, right?
How about this? How about this? That if Gabe Dean beats Bo Nickel's not in this discussion, and Gabe
Right.
Dean is, because
Correct.
Gabe Dean would go 3-1-1-1. Hypothetically saying, because that would have been his 3rd national title. It's not like he had to win anymore after that. So then we get into the discussion like Gabe Dean would be being argued against Ed Ruth in a situation. Well, they split, something like that. So I mean, I think if Gabe Dean would have won that title, I think he's definitely really pushing for a spot on this our 90th. And it's just amazing how 1 point.
He did split with Ruth, but his win was during the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
What if by chance he beat Ed in the finals and like,
well, we've been the semis,
or the semis? I mean,
they were on that side.
That puts him like, yes, I think that would have placed him on this list.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that if my years are correct, that was the Jack Deco Jimmy Sheptock semifinal on the top side, because Jimmy was the top seed. All right. Now we look at now here's where we get to the discussion. So we've kind of gone through it. We really haven't given a huge, I mean, you can't really talk about all the losses because we've only had to talk about, here's how many losses we've had to talk about. 8, let's see, 10, 13, 16 total losses. And of all of those 16 total losses, 1 opponent was not an All-American.
Wow.
That's
insane.
It's just, I love this discussion right now. So what we've basically got down now, we've got we're adding a position. Initially it was 5, so now it was 6. So Sanderson and Hodge are staying. They're undefeated national champions. Nobody else hits that criteria. So we've got Kale at 159-0, Danny Hodge at 46-0. Granted, again, this is just after World War II. He's the only wrestler, save Hulk Hogan, who, professional wrestler, to ever appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Actually, no, there is a wrestler from Augsburg who was on the cover of Sports Illustrated during an MMA feature. He actually does count, but he was the first wrestler, Dan Hodge, on the cover of Sports Illustrated from Oklahoma. Now, we have to pick 4 of these 5 wrestlers to be on our team. Ed Ruth, Kyle Snyder, Bo Nickel, Ed Bannock, Carlton Hasselrig. And who did I miss? Who am I missing? Let's see, Ruth, Cox. Yeah, Jaden Cox. Well, actually, didn't we eliminate Cox? Actually, we have to put Cox. We have to put Cox and Hasselrig in a tier.
Because
problem is if we do that, it looks like we've just already made our decision. But now we have to consider, where do we consider Bannock? But Bannock is a 1-1-2-1. So we've got 4 spots open, and it looks like we've got Ruth, Snyder, Nickel, and Bannock seem to fit the spots with. Those are the 6, but then you argue Hasselrig, but can we argue Hasselrig? Yes, he's got the 6 titles, like we talked about Gray Simons having 7, and you can't take that away from him because he had that opportunity and he made the most of it. But again, 3rd in Division II in the 80s, it's like, man, again, we're picking literal nits here to try to figure out a ranking of basically 4 to 6 guys that could be ranked anywhere from 4A to 4Q in this. It's just, I feel uncomfortable making this selection, Matt. I'll be quiet. This is almost as bad as Dieringer and Rutherford.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. And I know my second.
I've done a lot of the talking, I admit.
3rd and 4th. I think I'll go Snyder 3, Ruth 4. And then I've really got to think about the last two spots. So I know in my heart that I think both of these guys should be on there. And now the tough part is narrowing down pairing the final 4 to 2, because they're all equally deserving in other ways. But I think Snyder and Ruth, as we've discussed, we've discussed our rationale for why we believe that they should be on the team. So I'm going to put them in there. I'll let you jump in your, okay.
So I just had a thought too. Now let's compare the losses. Ed Bannock and Bo Nickel. They both lost to national champions. Bannock did not lose to a 4-time All-American, whereas Nickel did. However, Bannock lost to Mark Schultz, who won 3 titles. Nickel lost to Miles Martin, who that was his only title. So the better finals loss was Ed Bannock. But Ed Bannock had
But
9
he
losses,
also, Nickel
3
also
times more. Had 3 times more losses.
But I guess there's something to be said that Nickel avenged that loss to Martin later on in his career.
He did.
Which I think there's something to be said for that.
But did he did well, and he did one of those where the lights were on. So
yeah.
I think that could be a wash. Now I mean, the Bannock at 141, 9-1, 1-1-2-1, won it as a freshman, whereas Nickel didn't. But I'm trying to find a distinction between Nickel and Bannock, and it's really hard for me to do that other than Nickel did close his career 1-1-1, whereas Bannock lost as a junior. Do you give him more credit for winning as a freshman or losing as a junior? Do you knock him for that? So, I mean, this is perspective here. So, I mean, the key is I don't think you put one over the other. The problem is they're in a group of 2. If they're that tight, they're 5 and 6, leaving Cox and Hasselrig out.
They almost have to be, right? Because we are in our mind, we are.
But again, Hasselrig, they changed the rules because of him.
Yeah.
You know, allegedly. I don't know if we can't actually confirm that. Although there is a very strong there's a strong collection of coaches from that era that do believe that Carlton Hasselrig was the impetus for that rule change.
Well,
hence they call it the Hasselrig rule. And you're 143-3-1. Granted, it's a predominantly Division II schedule, but you went through the Division I championships. So I just have a hard time discounting somebody who won 6 NCAA titles in a modern era, and one of those losses in the one that prevented him from qualifying for a first Division I championship was a guy who was eventually a Division I All-American. So then again, so the guy he loses to, Dean Hall, ends up finishing 6th. So does Hasselrig win it as a freshman? Is he the finalist as a freshman? Is he 5th as a freshman, losing to the Dean Hall? So maybe that, if we're picking that nit so much that, all right, Hasselrig lost to a guy who was 6th to qualify. Well, the worst Cox did was 5th. I mean, I have so much respect for Carlton Hasselrig as a wrestler. It's like, I know, Pat Pecora, I just don't want to piss Pat Pecora off either. I mean, I'm scared of him more than I am John Smith, because I
mean, what you said about Carlton's regular seasons is a moot point. Anybody that wants to argue he wrestled a D2 schedule, that's a moot point, because he validated on the biggest stage.
And in Pat Pecora, I had him on my show talking about, he's the all-time leading wins leader in college wrestling as a coach. In that era, there wasn't, Portland State was Division II, routinely wrestling Oklahoma State. SIU Edwardsville was routinely wrestling teams in the Big 8 back then. So Pitt Johnstown,
Cal State Bakersfield was doing the same thing.
Yeah, and Pitt Johnstown was routinely wrestling the power programs in the East. So his schedule was not chopped liver. It wasn't like he's beating up people from Shippensburg every week. I mean, it was, there was some of that, but at the same point, there's some of that too when you're a power program. I mean, look at some of the Cream Puffs Penn State schedule. They're on the schedule there. We know it. So it's not like the regular season is a huge deal breaker here. I think again we're looking at the postseason, the victory, the match with Dean Hall may be the one that might have to push Hasselrig out of the discussion, because he did not qualify as a freshman and finishing 3rd in Division II. And I might have to think that 5th in Division I, losing to Kyle Snyder in the semis and a 3-time All-American Morgan McIntosh, who you avenged the loss to, that's the criteria that puts him ahead of Hasselrig, and that essentially eliminates both of them from being in the mix with Nickel and Bannock. So I almost have to say two of our two great big men, Jaden Cox and Carlton Hasselrig, are 7 and 8. If I can do my math here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 and 8. In any other day, any other discussion, they could be 3 and 4, or even 2, as high as 2. I mean, you could, This is what I love about this discussion is looking at we're talking about greatness here. And who the hell are we to talk about their greatness? But it's just so intriguing to me, and it's refreshing to sit there and really I want to fight to put Carlton Hasselrig in here. I want to fight to put Jaden Cox in here, and I want to fight to keep Ed Bannock, and I want to fight to put Bo. I mean, it's just it's been such a fun exercise.
The part of me wants to be Switzerland here, wave the white flag and say, let's do a top 10. This category deserves a top 10.
I mean, the thing is, it's 4 weights.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing. It's 3, 3, and 4. How about we had 1 extra weight. We get 1 extra spot. Now we're arguing Jaden Cox and Carlton Hasselrig. How about that?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I can't. I just think we should just, I don't want to, I actually kind of want to leave this an open book. I don't even want to put any finality. We left a coin toss with Deringer and Rutherford. We left that kind of open-ended.
I'm good with that.
Maybe like I said, you're Switzerland. I can't make the distinction of who to cut out. I mean, statistically, it would have to be Cox and Hasselrig simply because they don't have, everybody above them is a 4. Everybody above them except for Ed Ruth is a 4-time finalist.
Yes.
So that, from a stat standpoint, from a statistical standpoint, that has to be the line.
I'm with you.
I just think that this is it's 4 weights compared to the other ones. We went 125, 133, 141. Oh, 3 weights. Then we had 149, 157, 165, 3s. Here we got 4. I mean, and the problem is I think only Dan Hodge would actually be in the lower weight. Everybody else is big. So, because they all wrestled 70. Oh my goodness. Matt, I don't know. I think this is one of those things where the fans, you're out there, hit the comment section. Yeah. Now, are we crazy? Give us, I mean, are we looking at this the right way? I think we are. I think we're pretty open-minded in considering every aspect of it, of their college careers.
And I think we were pretty consistent with our rationale. Like, I don't think throughout this whole thing that we made any major deviations from what we established as our criteria from the 75th shows. So I think we're pretty consistent with our application of that criteria. And you've got to make calls when you establish that, because you kind of had.
I hated making this call, Matt. I hated it. I hate it. I hate it now.
And in the context of this conversation, I think there was some ambiguity to the 75th team on how it was voted on. I think there's got to be more strict criteria for the 90th team or the 100th team when they come around. Like, when we leave this up to the fans, let's educate them and formalize some criteria a little bit better before they go select it.
I say what, if they leave this up to the fans again, it's going to be Iowa and Penn State heavy, because they respond online. So
yes.
And that's the one thing that's just, I mean, again, start to finish, starting with our 75th anniversary redux and going back to what we've done here for the last 15 years has been even though it's recent memory, I think it's a great historical perspective to bring up some of these things. I mean, we've got greats hitting. I mean, Snyder and Cox is a match that's not even talked about in terms of their college lore as much as their matches in Fargo were. I mean, people forget that they met in the semifinals here. Like, that was the thing. And that wasn't even, I mean, I hear more about Fargo. I hear more about Brett. Oh, actually, I bring this up because in 2012, a guy from Iowa named Brett Haas had to wrestle Jaden Cox and Kyle Snyder back-to-back in Fargo. It was the last year of the vertical pairing. So, yeah, it was in Greco. So thanks. It's like every year we go to Fargo. Who's the worst draw ever? Brett Haas from Dubuque, Iowa. He holds the record because he got Cox and Snyder back-to-back. And as good as those careers gets, the bigger that story grows. So Brett, we don't know if we're going to have a Fargo this year or not. That is your annual mention that you wrestled those 2 guys in Fargo. But back to the point is their Fargo matches get talked about, I think, more than their semifinal match. And now we've got a potential Olympic trials final, whenever that's going to come sometime in 2021. So we've got great upper weights here. Bo's about to start his fighting career. You know, he's got that gym opening up. So, I mean, man, my heart hurts for not putting these people in here. I mean, I love Hasselrig. I mean, I like the heavyweights. Jaden Cox, again, love that guy. Just, hate not. Yeah. Anyway,
It's unfortunate.
That's what I got, guys. Hit
Yep.
the comment section. Hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Check us out, Matt. Any news coming down the RUDIS pipe before we go?
Nope, not much right now. So
Got some interviews coming. You had some guys in the office.
we've got some guys coming up. We've still got to finish. So we've gone through Logan's. We've got 2 more seasons to finish up with Logan. Got a few more interviews coming up, but I'm still working on any future interviews. So we're kind of finishing up some things. Carrie's been out of the loop. Obviously, we've taken over Navy. There's been a point of transition where he's traveling back and forth between North Carolina and Annapolis a lot right now. So our conversations have been interrupted. I don't know when we'll continue those on. I think this week he's up in Navy. We're trying to find a way. So that's kind of a fluid thing when we're going to bring Carrie in and out. We're trying to let him stabilize a little bit before we dive back in. But yeah, keep a lookout for everything.
That, and we got the Isaiah Martinez interview already up on the site at therudis.com. So that is our, there's no finality. We're just going to leave it open-ended. But those were the 6 I think we figured on. Sanderson, Hodge, Schneider, Ruth, Nickel, Bannock, Cox, and Hasselrig just on the outside looking in. That means Mark Schultz, who was our bump in, has been bumped out. Kurt Angle hit the road with the rest of the 2-timers. It's true. It's true. And that's where we're going to leave it on episode 157 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. We'll see you next time.